despised the Freedmen's Bureau and the Loyal Leagues, and, in the post-war years, increasingly took up arms against them. As Du Bois put it, guerrilla raiding, the ever-present flickering afterflame of war, was spending its forces against the Negroes, and all the Southern land was awakening as from some wild dream to poverty and social revolution. As time passed, the United States untidily found its way to a different idea of Reconstruction, one that put electoral politics at the center. Southern states that were willing to commit themselves to full civil and voting rights for the freed slaves were readmitted to the Union. The essence of the bargain was that Southern whites could vote if they would permit Southern blacks to vote too. The 14th and 15th Amendments, adopted in 1868 and 1870, enshrined these rights in the Constitution. Direct military rule ended. As Du Bois put it, "So the Freedmen's Bureau died, and its child was the 15th Amendment." Du Bois limited his essay on Reconstruction to the period ending in 1872, and, after noting its shift to the political realm, ended by ominously repeating his first line. "The problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line." That is the point where this book picks up the story. The answer to the all-important question of what kinds of lives black people might live in the South now depended on the freed slaves' organizing abilities and on the reliability of their voting rights. From these, governmental power, and then schools and jobs and justice, would flow. In the Southern states with the largest black populations, the tradition of white vigilantism, which had persevered among Confederate veterans despite, or perhaps because of, their defeat at Appomattox, began to evolve into an organized, if unofficial, military effort to take away by terrorist violence the black political rights that were now part of the Constitution. All across the South, raiders staged armed clashes with local forces of black political empowerment and federal authority. And everyone knew that through this scripted series of confrontations, the final meaning of the Civil War would be determined. This book focuses on a series of violent incidents, some of the most severe outside of formal warfare in American history, that took place within a limited time and space: Louisiana and Mississippi, in the 2.5 years from the spring of 1873 to the fall of 1875. Together, these incidents amounted to a long, bloody, climactic battle that settled the course of the political phase of Reconstruction, and therefore of a major part of the next century of American history. In telling the story of this crucial moment, and in aiming to make it vivid and resonant, I have used, as much as possible, contemporary rather than modern terminology. For example, the word Negro. And I have tried to present events from the inside, as they appeared to the participants, who of course didn't know how things would turn out or what their struggles would look like later. I hope that it has the feeling of history unfolding, not of history considered in retrospect. Prologue. Colfax, Louisiana, Easter Sunday, April 13, 1873. The Negroes had been in control of the village for 3 weeks now, and it was plain that something terrible was going to happen. Their leaders had left for New Orleans on Wednesday to try to get help, meaning, they hoped, a detachment of police, or even better, federal troops, who would come to protect the people in the village. The white militia was encamped out in the countryside a few miles away, and every day it was being reinforced with volunteers, mostly Confederate veterans who had heard the whites call for help, who had taken their shotguns and six-shooters and muskets and Springfield rifles from the Civil War down from the wall and saddled up their horses, and who had come to Colfax to fight for white supremacy. The Negroes, some of them at least, had guns too. Enfield rifles shipped up from New Orleans in boxes, and an assortment of lesser firearms. But by now there were many more people than guns to go around. Hundreds of people, including women and children, who had come to Colfax because they feared the whites bursting in on their homes and killing them. The Negro headquarters was the county courthouse, a two-story converted stable from a sugarcane plantation. At a short distance from it they had dug rudimentary breastworks, manned by sentries, to stave off the inevitable attack. All around, the Negroes from the countryside were camped out. Deeply lodged in the consciousness of the South was the ever-present possibility of a race war, in which, in each side's version, it would be mercilessly slaughtered by the other. If the anticipated deaths themselves were not horrible enough, unspeakable atrocities would make them more so. Now the inevitable was about to happen, and the cause was something that registered, in that time and place, as being literally a matter of life and death. Politics. The Civil War was not yet 10 years in the past. The Deep South was still in a raw condition not far removed from war. The two political parties and the two races were still violently opposed to each other. The great national questions the war had raised had by no means been settled. They were going to be settled now, with profound and lasting consequences for the whole United States, in places like rural Louisiana, by hard men with intensely local concerns, through the means of an armed struggle that, for all the potency of the load of racial fantasy it carried, was really about who could vote and hold government office. Colfax, Louisiana, was not really a town. It was more a settlement, containing just 5 or 6 structures, and new even to that status. It was not insignificant, though. It sat in the exact center of the state on the banks of the Red River, a sugarcane or cotton planter's dream waterway because it was navigable in the countryside of central Louisiana, where roads were poor and railroads non-existent, and because its floods had deposited a thick, rich layer of alluvial soil along its banks. The land around Colfax was lushly green and flat, and there was money in it. Local legend had it that Simon Legree, the plantation overseer in Uncle Tom's Cabin, who, in the public mind, symbolized the cruelty of American slavery, was based on a man named Robert McAlpin, who ran a plantation near Colfax called Hidden Hill, which Harriet Beecher Stowe had visited while preparing her book. The area around Colfax was lightly settled, with nearly impenetrable swamps and uncleared woods and labyrinthine bayous. Within easy memory, it had been wild country where desperate, lawless people could live free from social control. And even now it was common to hear about sightings of wild animals and to see families of settlers in covered wagons passing by on their way to Texas. Politically, Colfax was part of an experiment, a new Louisiana that would resemble the abolitionists' pre-war dream of how the South should be after its defeat in the Civil War. In 1868, a racially integrated, black and tan, Republican state legislature had created a new parish along the north bank of the Red River, drawing its boundaries so as to ensure that its local government would be Republican thanks to a Negro population majority. The parish was named Grant after the Republican President of the United States, Ulysses S. Grant, and its seat was named Colfax after the Republican Vice President, Schuyler Colfax. To most local whites, these were unpleasantly resonant names. Only a decade earlier, federal troops under General Grant's ultimate command — he was not far away, in Mississippi — had, as one white man from Colfax later remembered it, ravaged the Red River country using techniques taught them by the same experts in extermination that Grant's leading subordinate, General William Tecumseh Sherman, later used in his notoriously destructive march through Georgia. If it were in my power, I would as soon as possible change the name of Grant Parish to Lee and the site of her dispensatory of justice to Davis, another white resident asserted, referring to the Confederacy's commanding general and its president. On Easter Sunday, 1873, Louisiana was in a state of low-grade warfare. In 1872, while President Grant was being re-elected in a landslide, Louisiana had had a close and corrupt election. Both sides claimed victory, and now the state had 2 governors and 2 state legislatures, one Democratic and one Republican.